You're tuned to Warsaw. You are listening to Focus, our cultural magazine. I'm Ada Janiszewska, welcoming you to the show. In this edition, we will be speaking with Sophia Jansson, CEO of the Moomin Characters and heir to the legacy of the iconic Finnish cartoonist Tove Jansson. The beloved Moomins are celebrating their 80th anniversary, and to commemorate this milestone, a variety of events are being organized to immerse fans in the picturesque valley where all of the Moomins' adventures have unfolded over the years. What was it like growing up with the beloved Moomins? Let's find out. 80 years of Moomin stories, a beloved and well-known family of trolls. I think that over the years, the popularity has been increasing, which is quite interesting to witness, especially for you as you are part of this troll family, we have to say. And of course, the Moomins are literally a family affair. So that's why I want to talk about this legacy that you carry on. So you had this sort of like an intimate window into the whole creative process. So what was it like to grow up with the Moomins?
I think my insight has come later. As an adult, I realized that it was actually very special to grow up in my family. They were all artists. And of course, as a child, you don't understand that it's different to anything else. But gradually, as I grew older, I realized that my friends' families looked very different to my own. You know, the parents went to work every day and came home, and sometimes they didn't draw and play and write like everybody in my family. So, of course, I realized that my family was different. But I think it was really fun in many ways because it was a very loving environment. Also, an environment that was very creative. There were always new ideas, and life was approached as an adventure and as something fun, which is not to say that they didn't realize that there were difficult things that they had to face and do. Life was there to be enjoyed in any manner possible, based on, the same philosophy that's in the Moomin books, on the fact that you do things together, it's an adventure, and you're friendly, tolerant, and if there's a problem, you try and solve it in a peaceful manner rather than violently or by arguing.
They were like individuals who were very much creative and artistic, so did they encourage this artistic attitude toward life? Your father, of course, was cartoonist, your aunt was the creator of the Moomins.
In my home, my father was, during the 60s, he was drawing the Moomin strip cartoon. He drew it from 1960 till 1975. So I grow up with a father that's always at home, and he's drawing or writing the manuscripts for the strip cartoons. I think that was quite fun because, of course, watching somebody draw is inspirational. So you want to draw yourself. So, of course, I was encouraged to draw. And, of course, in the Jansson family, they also read a lot. So we were always reading. And my father loved adventure stories. So, of course, I, was encouraged to read adventure stories. And then it is a tradition in many Nordic families. I don't know about Poland, but to read out loud to children. Before I went to bed, my father would always read a story. I now realize that the adults were, in a way, quite childish. Or they knew the child in themselves. And so they never made me feel that I was in the way or, unimportant. We were always all on the same level.
Piggybacking on what you just said about Tove, your aunt, what was that relationship like? Because, she was becoming famous. As you said, she was very recognizable as an artist. So what was it like to be next to this person and kind of feel this limelight, this spotlight?
Well, to be honest, when we were together, we never talked about that. I mean, we were a normal family, and we were talking about food, the weather, and when we're going to the country, and how the cat is doing. And yes, my father worked very closely with her, so they would talk about different business projects and so. But with me, not really. And she never expected anybody to pay any attention to her fame. I don't think she really sort of thought of herself as very famous. It took me a long time to really understand how famous she was.
You were raised by a single father. Your mother died very early when you were a kid. So I'm just like wondering whether you could find this sort of like support from Tove and her life partner, Tuti.
Yeah, I mean, I love them. They were fantastic. We call them the girls. And I mean, they were always so supportive, but not really maybe in terms of, female issues and becoming a woman or any of those things. More about sort of choices in life. They encouraged me to pursue the things that I really loved and was interested in, and to, explore and fail. I think they were just sort of a very encouraging example of go out there and, do your own thing, be yourself, find out what you want to do. You don't have to know what you are.
Some researchers say that Tove based some of the characters from the Moomins off of her own family members. Do you find your dad or whoever that was in this family of trolls?
I think Tove, like any artist, uses real life as an inspiration. And of course, there are many who have read her books and read the comics who sort of want to draw kind of a line between her creation and real life. And to a point, you can do that. I mean, I'm sure in many interviews she said herself, of course, the Moomin family is inspired by her own family, her mom and her dad and, all those things. But I think it's quite important to understand that life around you and your surroundings are they're the fountain of where you get your inspiration. But it's what the artist does with that that's important. And of course, when Tove then creates the comic or creates the books, she uses life, but she forms it to her own purpose for her own work. She was trained as a painter and as an illustrator and a decorative painter. So, her skills of composition are quite good and quite developed. So when she creates, say, the character gallery and the Moomin stories, you have the family, but she creates each character has a place, and it has a place in the whole, in the universe, that has a purpose and a meaning. And she uses the family as the foundation and a beautiful valley and an area as a foundation for her stories. But they are, of course, developed and created to fit her purpose. And to put them as a, stencil over real life would be missing the point. Because she's distilling the idea of things in her stories rather than making a documentary of her life.
That's actually incredible, and also touching upon your relation with the Moomins. In one of your interviews, and I quote, you said that they were just there, part of the furniture. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because I was kind of intrigued by that reference, that they were so mundane things to you.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, because it was, the Moomins were what my father and Tove worked with, and, everybody, the whole family was in a way involved in some shape or form, and they were just there. You never questioned them and you never thought of them, and so they were just like furniture. I mean, they were just there. You didn't really think about it. Literally, I mean, they had always been there. And so because the Moomins were created before I was born, and so, the trees are there. The Moomins are there. Of course they are.
It was like a natural thing, of course. When we think about the Moomins, the first person who comes to our mind is, of course, Tove. She's linked to the project. However, we have to mention a huge vital role of your father, Lars, as we mentioned at the beginning, that he was also a creator of some of the stories, and he stepped in when it comes to the business part of the Moomin. So can you give us insight into what it was like then?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a very early age, my father and Tove realized they were more alike. I mean, there's another brother who is in between, Per-Olof. Of the siblings, Tove and my father were more similar in personality. And then so my father starts helping Tove out quite early with different projects. And then when the cartoon strip is the main project in the 1950s, the manuscripts have to be written in English. And Tove liked to write, of course, in Swedish. That was her main language. It is my father who translates them into English. He's an Anglophile like many in the family, and he translates them into English. So he starts working with her then. And then gradually, during the 50s, the Moomin books become more popular, and there are events and products and stuff. And Tove actually needs help, and so my father helps her out. And in a quite organic way, he starts taking care of, the business side of things. And so it goes through the years. And he not actually being the main creator, maybe he has a bit more distance and he can deal with sort of the business side of it in a less emotional way than Tove. So yeah, he starts helping her out quite early and he becomes her right-hand man when it comes to contracts and things. And then in the late 50s, they establish a company, Moomin Characters. They deposit the copyright of the Moomins into that company, and that enables him to actually sign contracts in the company name. And so yeah, he has quite a vital role in the beginning and all throughout then the remainder of her life. He is really a super important part of, everything that happens around the Moomins.
And you initially were not really that much drawn into the family business. So when did it occur to you that you actually want to step in as the head of the company and somehow, continue the thing that your father and your aunt started?
I moved back to Finland after having spent a long time abroad in 1997. I was recently divorced and I had 2 small children and I needed a job. And so my father actually said, why don't you come and work for the Moomin Company? And at the time, I remember thinking, oh no, do I have to really, And then, of course, I needed the money, so I started working sort of a bit like his assistant. He wasn't really working in an office. He was working from home, but I went to the office. And then, of course, when I was working there, I realized, this is easy. I know this. I can do this. I know all the characters and I know everything. And I know from the inside out, this isn't hard. And so, of course, I stayed. I think for a while in the beginning, I had thought maybe I would go on to do something else eventually. But then my father died in 2000, sort of shortly afterwards, and Tove in 2001. And of course, I inherited most of the company, and it became my decision and my responsibility to decide what to do with the company and what to do with the cultural heritage that Tove left behind. That was a huge responsibility, but it felt extremely personal and very important to me because I had grown up with this family, and so I really wanted to carry on. And some, people said, oh, but you can sell it and you can, just do something else. And at the time I just thought, no, of course not. I have to take care of this. This is the most important thing. This is part of my life. This is part of who I am. For me, it wasn't difficult at all at the time. I just thought, okay, I have to figure out how to do this and carry on with the company. And many things I did know, but of course I had no business training in business. So eventually then in 2008, I hire a managing director, Rolf Krogström, who then becomes my husband. And he had a really long experience he used to work for a publishing company as the marketing director. He understood, the equation of business, culture, and, the money in between and how to work it and how to balance those things. And I'd already gotten some insight to it. When he came on board, he said, you can do so much more with this. Do you want to? And I said, yeah, of course. We really want to, keep the books in print and make the Moomins more well-known across the world. And he said, okay, let's get to work, just pull your arms up and let's get to work.
It was a completely game changer, I have to say. And you, as a director, decided to stick with the original art.
Well, yeah, when I actually came on board, and in the late 90s, there had been a television series that was quite popular, very popular in Finland, actually. And so, the business side had taken the artwork from that television series. And there's nothing wrong with the television series, but the artwork that they had produced based on it looked terrible. And so I said, this can't go on. We need to have artwork based on the original material that Tove created, because there are beautiful illustrations and beautiful things that we could use, much better than what I'm seeing right now. So we set out to change that and make guidelines and style guides and things based on the original material, because I said, ultimately our goal is for anybody who stumbles on a Moomin product, for them to actually pick up a Moomin book and read the Moomin books. That's where it all started, and we need to get people back to the origin. It sounds easy now in hindsight. So we just did this. It wasn't that easy. It wasn't a self-evident process, because people had, say, gotten to know the Moomins through the animation series, and they really wanted those Moomin trolls and not the originals. They didn't like the originals. And I'm like, oh, oh, but actually we need to change back to the originals because we need people to be interested in the original texts and the original books. So yeah, it was a process, but gradually we got there. And I think now we have been there for a long time, but we are really improving also people's understanding of the artwork and of the texts and of the comics and everything to a point where they find Tove and Tove's life really inspirational and exciting.
Sophia Jansson, CEO of the Moomin Characters and heir to the legacy of the iconic Finnish cartoonist Tove Jansson, was a guest in this edition of our cultural magazine Focus. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Ada Janiszewska. Take care.